The ideology known as Peronism derives its name from the Argentine political leader Juan Domingo Perón, who significantly contributed to its inception and widespread acceptance. Perón was the president of Argentina for 3 separate terms that were not consecutive. His first term was from 1946 to 1952, his second was from 52 to 55, and his third and last term was from 73 to 74. His strong leadership in political and social policies had a huge effect on Argentine politics and society in the middle of the 20th century and after. Peronism, often known as justicialism, was a powerful political movement in Argentina throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. After taking part in the Argentine military takeover of 1943, Perón was appointed labor secretary, and 4 years later he was elected president. He implemented social initiatives that aided the working class, encouraged labor unions, and advocated for greater state participation in the economy. The overarching ideology of Peronism has been characterized as a vague amalgamation of laborism and nationalism, or populism.
This is the Sundeep Show.
Let's start with nationalization. Perón was about doing everything and containing everything indoors, within Argentina. Political motivations frequently influenced Perón's nationalization policies, while including the desire to consolidate power and obtain labor union support. When choosing to nationalize industries, it is critical to make a distinction between political goals and economic factors. Nationalization can affect effectiveness in both good and bad ways, although this approach may grant the government authority over critical industries and resource allocation. It can also engender inefficiencies, bureaucratic red tape, and dearth of competition, all of which have the potential to impede productivity and impede overall economic expansion. The government's capacity to successfully oversee and run the nationalized industries will determine whether nationalization is successful or not. Inadequate proficiency and ability may result in substandard administration and monetary deficits. Investment in the nationalized industry may be impacted by nationalization, poor maintenance, and development of infrastructure because of a lack of private sector investment may have long-term economic repercussions. Since publicly owned sectors may offer different incentives for innovation than private sector enterprises, state ownership may not necessarily stimulate innovation and technical growth. During the process of nationalization, regulatory agencies to oversee newly nationalized industries are frequently established, or the jurisdiction of existing regulatory bodies is increased. The effectiveness of these regulatory bodies in preserving high standards of service, quality, fair competition, and financial stability is crucial. When businesses are taken over by the government, they don't have to improve their quality, efficiency, or productivity to stay in business. This stunts creativity and entrepreneurship. Since the government controlled the distribution of credit and resources, nationalization of enterprises hindered private initiative and investment. Argentina's debt crisis and inflation may be traced back to the country's decision to nationalize its industries, which cut it off from the international market and increased its reliance on foreign loans. The nationalization of industries, particularly utilities and railroads, led to the creation of expensive, inefficient state-owned businesses, created massive deficits that were financed by money that was generated by the central bank. The government may face severe financial hardships as a result of nationalization and may need bailouts and subsidies to continue operating. This may put up pressure on the government's finances and result in fiscal deficits. Import substitution industrialization (ISI) policies were instituted by the government of Perón in an effort to substitute domestically produced goods for imported ones. To safeguard and advance regional industries, this tactic entailed placing hefty taxes and import limitations on goods from other countries. Businesses found it hard to bring in things from other countries because the government controlled the distribution of import licenses. These permits were frequently only given to sectors of the economy that were deemed strategically significant or in need of safeguarding. International relations and foreign investment can easily suffer from nationalization. It can result in disagreements with international investors and a decline in trust in the business climate of a nation. As a result of Perón's nationalization of a number of foreign-owned companies, including AT&T, a telephone company owned by the United States, and imposition of high tariffs and import restrictions to shield domestic industries from foreign competition, foreign investment decreased substantially. Foreign investors' confidence and trust in Argentina's economic and legal stability diminished due to Perón's exploitation of public funds to reward his loyal supporters and stifle his opponents, as well as his erosion of the rule of law and economic freedom. Argentina's foreign commerce weakened as it became isolated from the world market and increased its reliance on foreign loans, leading to debt crisis and inflation. Lack of accountability and transparency in nationalized companies may lead to corruption and poor management. Eva Perón, Perón's wife, became wealthy by assisting Nazis fleeing to Argentina after World War II and depositing their stolen riches in Swiss bank accounts. She allegedly utilized her position of power to gain access to those accounts and siphon off part of the funds for her own purposes. During her 1947 goodwill tour of Europe, Eva Perón also placed millions of dollars in a Swiss bank account. In order to conceal their illegal wealth and avoid paying taxes, Juan Perón and his friends also used Swiss bank accounts. They were accused of accepting bribes from foreign firms and governments, as well as stealing public cash from nationalized industries and the Eva Perón Foundation. Okay, we will move on to populist spending. Perón wanted to fight for the poor. He wanted to break economic inequality. Measures that can improve popular support and offer short-term advantages, such as social programs, subsidies, and higher wages in the public sector, are frequently included in populist spending plans. In the long run, nevertheless, these policies may put a pressure on public finances and result in inflation, fiscal deficits, and unmanageable debt levels. Argentina's experience with spending by populists shows how important it is to keep the economy as a whole stable. Populist policies have the potential to devalue currencies, breed uncertainty, and erode investor confidence, all of which make it more challenging to draw in foreign capital. The depreciation of currency can be attributed to populist expenditures. Numerous currency crises that Argentina has experienced have reduced the value of the peso. Preventing inflation and financial instability requires maintaining currency stability. Corruption, patronage, and the erosion of the rule of law and economic freedom are all potential outcomes of populist regimes. As a result, there may be a decrease in demand for home currency and an increase in demand for foreign currencies as a safe haven. This can also lead to political and economic instability, which can discourage private initiative and investment. When the economy depends too much on certain areas like agriculture, it can be sensitive to shocks from outside and changes in the prices of commodities. Resilience can be increased by industrialization and economic diversification. Spending that is motivated by populism frequently sidesteps or delays the implementation of important economic changes. These reforms can involve adjustments to tax laws, pension plans, and labor markets. In the long run, structural reforms can enhance economic performance. Relationships with foreign governments and international organizations may suffer as a result of populist measures. Argentina's debt restructuring and default have resulted in a history of disputes with foreign creditors. For economic stability, diplomatic and financial ties must be maintained. Populist spending can lower inequality and poverty, while delivering much-needed social support. It is imperative to strike a balance between budgetary prudence and these initiatives or programs, and to concentrate on how they will affect economic stability in the long run. Gaining or retaining political support is frequently the driving force behind populist ideas. It is, therefore, very important to understand how political cycles work and how they affect choices about the economy. When industries were nationalized in Argentina, it opened the door to chances for corruption and favoritism because President Perón utilized public funds to reward his loyal friends and crush his opponents. Alright, we now move on to the more aggressive and regressive side of things. Perón silenced his critics. You couldn't say much about him. He was constantly making sure of that. Dissent suppression has the potential to erode democratic values and institutions. The fundamentals of a robust democracy were undermined by Perón's government's restrictions on the freedom of assembly, the press, and expression. The repression of dissent frequently exacerbates political division. It can generate a us versus them mentality and profound societal differences, making it difficult to foster national unity. Human rights violations, arbitrary arrests, torture, and the persecution of political opponents can arise from the suppression of dissent. Such acts carry long-term legal and societal consequences. Authoritarian governance and political instability may have detrimental effects on the economy. A nation whose dissent is repressed may scare away investors, which could result in lower foreign investment and economic stagnation. Suppressing criticism can silence critical voices that may have good points and ideas for making things better. This may lead to less informed decisions that could be detrimental to the growth of the country. There were instances of political violence and executions while Perón was president. The infamous Loyalty Day episode of 1956, which saw the killing of military officers who had opposed Perón's administration, serves as an example of this. Moreover, accounts surfaced indicating that political adversaries were targeted with lethal force and extrajudicial executions. Almost 2,000 university professors and faculty members were dismissed by Perón from all of the country's largest public schools. Cipriano Reyes, a union leader, spent years in prison after betraying Argentina's president, Perón. When Perón replaced the Labour Party with the Peronist Party in 1947, Reyes led a strike in protest. Despite the fact that the allegations against him were never validated, he was detained on suspicion of planning to assassinate the president and First Lady. 5 years later, Reyes was still denied parole, and he wasn't set free until the regime collapsed in 1955. Cipriano Reyes was among the several opponents of Perón, detained at the Ramos Mejia General Hospital in Buenos Aires. A police detention center was established in one of the hospital's basements where torture was a common practice. He was charged with stifling dissenting opinions and restricting media access. 45 newspapers were shut down as a result of the work of the Commission for Investigating Anti-Argentine Activities, which released a list of them in 1950. The president of Argentina filed a libel lawsuit against La Prensa and La Nación, the country's two biggest newspapers, alleging that one of the opposition deputies' attacks on his credibility had been published. The government exerted pressure on both newspapers since it possessed complete control over newsprint supplies and utilized its authority to enforce submission. Perón also suppressed media critics and imprisoned political rivals. When the government monopolized printing ink in 1948, they used it as a weapon to silence the few surviving independent publishers. Government inspectors often visited newspapers critical of the Peróns, imposing fines and orders based on false accusations of tax evasion and worker abuse. The silencing of dissenting voices can foster an atmosphere of anxiety and mistrust, which makes it more difficult for various sectors of society to have fruitful conversations with one another and work together. Suppression of dissent can erode civil society by inhibiting advocacy, activity, and overall participation in public life. Suppressing dissent can harm a country's worldwide reputation, which can impact trade, foreign aid, diplomatic ties, and the growth of strong independent groups that are essential to advancing democratic values. Even when a regime shifts, authoritarianism's legacy may endure. Rebuilding democratic institutions and cultivating a culture of open debate and free expression can be a time-consuming and difficult undertaking. Argentina's nationalization attempts during Juan Perón's presidency gave important lessons on the complicated trade-offs and consequences of state ownership of enterprises. In order to accomplish their objectives while preserving effectiveness and financial sustainability, decision-makers should carefully evaluate the political, social, and economic ramifications of nationalization and take into account alternate policy choices such as privatization. The history of Peronism and populist expenditure in Argentina can be used as a case study to illustrate the trade-offs and difficulties connected with these types of programs. They could offer social support and short-term advantages, but if they're not handled properly, they might cause long-term financial issues. Constraints against dissent during the regime of Perón in Argentina serve as a cautionary tale regarding the perils of undermining human rights, democratic values, and political pluralism. It underlines the significance of preserving a robust democracy and defining the right to free speech while serving as a reminder of the potential long-term social, political, and economic repercussions of such acts. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Sundeep August. This is the Sundeep August Show. The populist legal reforms implemented by Perón, which undermined the principles of the rule of law and economic freedom, resulted in enduringly detrimental consequences for the course of economic development and progress. If not for the short-sighted populist policies of Perón, Argentina would be a wealthy country right up to the current day, with a per capita income that is comparable to that of countries in Southern Europe. Thank you.
This is the Sundeep Show.